Why was she trembling when the alarm hadn't even started yet? Dakota Rivers had learned to keep her hands steady under fire. But there, inside Fort Garrison's Blacksite Armory, something deeper than fear made her pulse uneven. Maybe it was the air too clean, too quiet, too full of ghosts. Or maybe it was because she knew what she was walking into wasn't just another inspection. It was the end of a 3-year hunt. Step away from the weapons cage maintenance. Sergeant Derek Martinez's voice sliced through the morning stillness like a knife drawn slow. Not shouted, just heavy with the kind of authority that comes from knowing everyone will obey, even before they think. Dakota looked up from the biometric scanner, her reflection ghosted in its blue light. She didn't flinch, didn't apologize, just lifted her chin with a quiet steadiness that made people around her uncertain whether they were looking at defiance or discipline. At 5'4", in a faded maintenance uniform and boots that had seen more gravel than glory, she looked like no one important, a supply clerk maybe, some overworked sergeant filling out audit sheets. But Martinez's instincts were right. There was something off about the way she stood, the way her hands never fidgeted, the way her eyes measured distances and exits instead of faces. Chief Warrant Officer Tom Bradley, the man in charge of security, felt it too. 15 years of guarding armories from Kandahar to Kansas had taught him to trust that prickle in the back of his neck, the little whisper that says, "This one isn't what she seems." Dakota's fingers brushed the outline of the Silver Star medal in her pocket. It weighed exactly 1.3 ounces. She knew because she'd weighed it, once, the night after it was pressed into her palm by a dying man named Captain James Foster. He'd been bleeding out on a dirt road in the dark, eyes already clouding over, whispering words she'd never stopped hearing. Trust no one in supply chain. The wolves are inside. 3 years later, here she was standing in the wolves' den, pretending to be one of them. I said step away. Martinez's hand rested on his holster now, not drawn, not yet, just a message. 15 soldiers around the room froze mid-motion, caught between curiosity and the instinct to disappear. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, painting every surface in sterile white, a color that always made blood stand out more vividly. Dakota stepped back slowly, palms visible, her voice stayed calm. "I have authorized access, Sergeant. CAC card verified, biometrics on file, monthly serial verification." Martinez smirked, a wolf showing teeth. "Maintenance doesn't have clearance for a Blacksite, not at 0630. His gaze dropped down her uniform, noting the absence of name tape, unit patch, regulation pride. "You don't even look like you belong in uniform." Before Dakota could respond, a young private spoke up, Elena Rodriguez, new to the detail, still carrying the optimism that hadn't yet been crushed by rank and routine. "Sergeant, her card scanned green. System says she's authorized." The kindness in her tone was a mistake. Thompson, Martinez's right-hand man, tall, wiry, jittery from too much caffeine and too little conscience, shoved her back hard. "Mind your lane, boot." The sound of boots scraping concrete echoed in the silence that followed. Nobody moved to help her. They all knew how this worked. The new get tested. The weak get pushed. Everyone else keeps their head down. Dakota didn't move, didn't speak, just watched the shove happen with eyes that had seen far worse. Then her thumb found the edge of the metal again, tracing the tiny star, the engraved initials, the proof that truth had a weight. Captain Foster had tried to do things the right way. Reports, evidence, chain of command. He followed every regulation until those same regulations buried him. His death was called an accident, but the metal in her pocket said otherwise. Martinez broke the silence. "Bag check." He pointed at the worn rucksack slung over Dakota's shoulder. "New security protocol, full inspection before entry." Bradley frowned from his desk. "Since when? I haven't seen any memo." Martinez didn't even look at him. "Since 0600, Colonel's orders, verbal confirmation." He held out his hand, Bag now. For 2 seconds, only two, Dakota hesitated, but everyone noticed. Her hand tightened on the strap like someone holding onto a lifeline that was about to be cut. Then, with a steady breath, she unhooked it and placed it on the table. Martinez grabbed the bag, turned it over, and emptied it in one motion. The contents spilled across the metal table: papers, charger, half-eaten protein bar, and a small water bottle that rolled off the edge and hit the floor with a hollow clang. The noise echoed louder than it should have in that sterile space, but what came next silenced everything. A metallic clink. Then a ring. The silver star metal hit the concrete and spun, a flash of light, a sound too sharp to be ordinary. Bradley froze mid-sip of coffee. Martinez's sneer faltered. It was just a medal. Soldiers earned them, bought them, lost them. But this one, something about the engraving, the way the letters caught the light, made the room feel colder. And then the alarm began to scream. A deep, pulsing siren, red strobes flooding the armory, the kind of alarm no one had ever heard before. Code black, code black, code black. The voice was calm, feminine, mechanical. Biometric anomaly detected. Lockdown initiated. Remain in place. The steel doors slammed shut with a pneumatic hiss. Shutters clanged over the windows. Ventilation shifted tone, cutting off external air. The armory transformed from workplace to prison in less than 10 seconds. Martinez stumbled backward, hand gripping his weapon. What the hell did you do? Dakota didn't move. She stood in the same spot, hands open, eyes steady. I didn't do anything, you did. Outside, a muffled boom rippled through the concrete. The floor shuddered. Everyone turned toward the window, just in time to see black smoke rising from the motor pool. Secondary explosion, Dakota said quietly. That's thermite. Bradley stared at her. How could you possibly know that? Because someone's destroying evidence. She turned toward him, and for the first time her voice carried rank. I've been tracking this operation for 3 months, Chief. That medal belonged to Captain James Foster. You remember him, the supply officer who died in that accident 3 years ago. The man who reported massive ammunition discrepancies. Martinez's face drained of color. That's impossible. Foster's dead. I was at his memorial. Dead men don't file reports, Dakota replied, but they leave evidence. She nodded at the metal lying on the floor, still flashing red from the alarm lights. That metal was his insurance policy. Microchip in the backing. Biometric activation. He knew someone in this armory was selling weapons to the cartels. He just didn't know who, but I do. Thompson pulled his weapon, voice trembling. You're lying. You're some kind of terrorist. You caused that explosion. Dakota ignored him. Private Rodriguez, she called, still calm. You were on duty last Thursday, 0200, correct? The young private flinched. Why, yes, ma'am. Did Sergeant Martinez and Specialist Thompson perform an unscheduled inventory that night? Elena hesitated, eyes darting between them. I'm not supposed to. The mechanical voice interrupted. Code Black protocol requires all personnel to assist in security verification. Full cooperation is mandatory. They said it was a surprise inspection, Elena blurted, but they only checked section Delta 7. Shut your mouth, Private, Thompson snapped, too loud, too fast. Bradley bent down and picked up the medal. His hands trembled as he read the serial number. This is Foster's medal, his actual medal. How did you get this? He gave it to me, Dakota said. Right before he died, I was his handler. Criminal Investigation Division, Special Operations. We were building a case. He was going to testify to a grand jury the next day, but someone in this room made sure he didn't. Another explosion shook the air. Lights flickered, then steadied on backup power. Through the tactical radio, voices crackled, panic orders, chaos. Motor pool on fire, suppression disabled, EOD en route. Dakota listened without expression. 3 months I've watched you, Martinez. 3 months of midnight inventory adjustments, missing ammunition, shipments that reappear in cartel raids. I logged every transaction. She pulled a rugged tablet from her cargo pocket, its cracked screen glowing blue under the emergency lights. Everything's here, every discrepancy, every name. And now, thanks to your panic, the base is sealed. No escape, no cleanup. Martinez's hand twitched toward his gun. Don't, Bradley's voice thundered. His own pistol was steady, his stance that of a man who'd given orders under fire. Nobody draws a weapon in my armory. Step back. You don't understand. Martinez's voice cracked, desperation bleeding through authority. She's setting us up. She planned this. Dakota checked her watch. Actually, Sergeant, you planned it. Those explosions outside. Your people planted them last night. Vehicles scheduled for inspection today, all part of the evidence you needed to destroy. A sound rolled through the building, a rhythmic clicking from deep within the storage rooms. Thompson froze. That's a timer. 6 of them, Dakota said. Standard C4 with mechanical triggers. You placed them in the ammo cages 4 hours ago. 5 minutes until detonation, unless someone disarms them. Garcia, the oldest of the detail, went pale. That's enough ammo to level half the base. Dakota nodded. Which is why you're going to tell us where they are, Sergeant Martinez. Martinez's hand jerked again toward his weapon, but Bradley was faster. His sidearm came up smooth, trained center mass. Freeze. For 3 long seconds, the world narrowed to breathing and heartbeat. Water dripped from a leaking pipe overhead, the only sound between them. Then the youngest voice in the room broke the standoff. Private Rodriguez, trembling, yanked down the bright red fire alarm. Sprinklers exploded overhead, drenching everyone in cold water. The shock snapped the room back to life. Weapons lowered, curses shouted, confusion replacing fear. Dakota moved through the chaos like she'd rehearsed it in her mind. She caught Bradley's eye through the rain of water. Chief, open the ammunition door. Now, I can disarm these devices, but we have to move. He hesitated only half a heartbeat, then tossed her his access card. Override code 7719 Alpha. Dakota caught it one-handed and sprinted for the nearest security door. Steam hissed from the hydraulic locks as they disengaged. Inside, rows of ammunition stretched floor to ceiling, metal, firepower, death waiting to happen. On the far wall, a small box blinked red, timer counting down. 4 minutes 12 seconds. She exhaled slowly. Standard config, commercial detonator, old school. Turning to Garcia, she barked orders over the noise. You built them, you helped disarm them. I can't. You can. Or you explain to the board why you knew how to plant bombs but not how to stop them. He stumbled forward, soaked, shaking. Cut the blue wire first, Dakota said, handing him a multi-tool. Then the red, don't touch the green, decoy circuit. Martinez always uses the same pattern. Martinez's voice echoed from behind her. How the hell would you know that? Without looking up, Dakota answered, because Foster documented everything, including your habit of reusing bomb templates. He was wearing a wire, Sergeant. We have your voice offering him 50 grand to look away. Garcia's trembling hand snipped the blue wire. The timer froze at 3 minutes, 41 seconds. 1 down. Dakota wiped water from her face. 5 to go. She turned back toward the main floor, alarms blaring. Soldiers soaked and wide-eyed, Martinez cornered, Thompson pale, Rodriguez still standing by the dripping alarm she'd pulled like it was a lifeline. In the echoing chaos of the lockdown, one thought cut through Dakota's mind with surgical clarity. Foster, I'm here, I found them, and this time they don't get away. Why did her hands feel steady when her heart was? Dakota Rivers crouched before the second storage room door, drenched in cold sprinkler water, surrounded by the sharp scent of metal and cordite. Her hands were rock solid, but somewhere deep in her chest, something trembled. Not fear, not adrenaline, memory. Behind her, the armory echoed with shouts and dripping water. Soldiers scrambled to contain the chaos. Martinez barked orders no one obeyed. Bradley guarded the conspirators, his weapon still drawn. The lights flickered red, white, red again. The alarm had become background noise, a steady heartbeat of danger. Dakota swiped Bradley's access card. The heavy door unsealed with a hiss, revealing the second ammunition bay, stacks of crates, each labeled with the precise, bureaucratic handwriting of a system that believed in order. And somewhere in that false order, chaos pulsed in red light. 3 minutes. She stepped inside. This one's trapped. Garcia hovered behind her, pale as smoke. Trapped how? Dakota knelt, flashlight cutting through the gloom. The device was hidden beneath a rack of 7.62 ammunition, wires braided tight, connected to a mercury switch, the kind that punished movement. If this crate shifts, she said quietly, it all goes up. Outside, voices rose. Thompson's paranoia was boiling over. We can't trust her. You saw the explosions. She's behind this. She's... Elena Rodriguez interrupted, her voice trembling but firm. She's the only one who can stop this. Dakota didn't look up from the bomb. Rodriguez, get everyone out of this section. Minimum safe distance. Go. The private hesitated. What about you? I'll be fine. She lied because it was necessary. Rodriguez nodded once and ran. Boots splashed through the shallow water, echoing away. The alarm lights flickered across Dakota's face, alternating calm and fury, like a storm beneath discipline. Behind her, someone didn't move. Thompson! Everyone stop, he shouted, weapon raised. Nobody leaves, you're all being played. Dakota didn't even glance his way. She'd seen men like him before, trapped between guilt and denial, looking for someone else to shoot before the truth aimed back. Put it down, specialist. You don't give orders here. A pause, then the sound of another voice. Elena again, closer than she should have been. You're going to shoot the only person who can save us, she said, stepping between Thompson and Dakota. He froze, finger trembling on the trigger. The young private, soaking wet, terrified, stood there with her arms out, blocking his aim. Her voice cracked, but her courage didn't. You think killing her fixes what you did. You think Foster died so you could keep pretending. Thompson's jaw locked. His eyes glistened with the kind of shame that turns men violent. Dakota's voice cut through like steel. Rodriguez, move. But Elena didn't. No, I've watched you and Martinez sneaking in at night. I saw you loading those crates that never got logged. I thought I was just new, thought I didn't understand the system. But I did. You're a coward, Thompson. You all are. The gun in his hand shook. And while they argued, Dakota moved, calm, methodical, precise. Her fingers slipped beneath the mercury switch, using a fragment of mirror to see the underside. One false move would vaporize the entire room. 2 minutes 40 seconds. She disconnected the first trigger, her reflection in the mirror a ghost of focus. Chen, she called softly without looking back, get everyone clear. Chen hesitated, eyes darting between Thompson's gun and Dakota's calm. Then he nodded and started pulling people toward the hallway. Water dripped, wires glowed. Thompson's breathing grew ragged. You don't understand, they said they'd release the videos. Dakota paused mid-motion, her hands inches from the detonator. What videos? She asked quietly. Thompson's voice broke. Vegas, 2 years ago we were on leave. There were girls, drugs, they filmed everything. Said if we didn't cooperate, they'd send it to our families, our commands. And you chose treason over embarrassment. He flinched like she'd struck him. Dakota severed the final connection. The timer froze at 2:32. She exhaled, only then realizing she'd been holding her breath. The device was inert. She stood, facing him fully for the first time. The sprinklers had stopped, leaving the room in a haze of steam and emergency red. "Foster chose death over dishonor," she said softly. "And you chose to arm killers because you couldn't keep your secrets." Thompson's weapon lowered an inch, then another. Finally, it clattered to the floor. Alina exhaled like she'd been holding it for years. Bradley's voice echoed from the hallway. "Rivers, status." "2 devices disarmed," Dakota called back. "4 remaining." She wiped water from her eyes, glancing down at her reflection in the puddle. For a moment, she saw Foster's face instead of her own, that same unflinching calm in the face of betrayal. "The ghosts never left you. They just learned your name." Bradley appeared at the doorway, weapon still drawn, eyes flicking between Dakota, Thompson, and the inert bomb. "You keep this up, you'll make EOD look like amateurs." She almost smiled. "Almost. Chief, if I wanted to show off, I'd have let the first one go off." "Remind me never to play poker with you," he muttered, motioning her onward. They moved together toward the third storage area, their boots sloshing through 2 inches of water. Sparks hissed where broken wiring met puddles. The air stank of ozone and thermite. Dakota's mind ran on instinct and memory. She'd done bomb work before Kandahar, Mosul, those long nights when silence was the only thing between you and death. But this was different. This wasn't war. This was betrayal under fluorescent lights. They reached the third door. Martinez stood there, restrained now, soaked, trembling. His voice was smaller than before. "You can't stop them all." "Watch me." Dakota swiped the access card. The door hissed open. The third room was tighter, lined with armored crates, and in the corner the red blink again. 146. Dakota dropped to her knees. "This one's advanced." Bradley knelt beside her, his pistol holstered for the first time. "You really think we can stop this?" She smiled faintly. "That's progress." Garcia appeared behind them, voice trembling. "This is Martinez's build. It's got a secondary timer, a cell receiver." "Remote detonation," Dakota said, scanning the circuit, "so they can blow it from off base." Bradley's face hardened. "Then we cut the connection." "Not that simple." Her flashlight beam traced over a cluster of colored wires. "This is deliberate misdirection. You cut the wrong one, it goes early." Garcia handed her the tablet, scrolling through Foster's old files. He documented similar builds. "Look, see. Martinez used red to ground as a fake loop." "Which means," Dakota murmured. "The real trigger's black," Garcia finished. Dakota took a breath. 60 seconds. Garcia's voice trembled. "You sure about this?" "No, but we're out of time." She sliced through the black wire, clean, precise. "Nothing." The timer still ticked. Chen shouted from the hallway, "Timer still running." Dakota's gaze narrowed. Then she saw it, a secondary board beneath the main housing, buried under epoxy. Double redundancy. Clever bastard. She reached under the casing, fingers finding a tiny connector. 15 seconds. "Rivers," Bradley's tone held warning and trust in equal measure. 10. Dakota. 5. She pulled the connector. The timer froze at 11 seconds. Silence. For a moment nobody breathed. Then Bradley laughed, a short, incredulous sound. "You are insane." "Efficient," she corrected. She stood, dripping, scanning the tablet. 3 devices down. Her voice grew softer. "Foster used to say every system leaves a fingerprint. You just have to look where no one else does." Bradley studied her, the calm precision, the quiet grief behind it. "You knew him well." Dakota's jaw flexed. "He was my friend, my mentor. He believed in a system that killed him. I'm here to make sure it doesn't kill anyone else." The radio on Bradley's belt crackled. "Fire team reports multiple secondary explosions contained. Motor pools gone. Unknown casualties." Dakota closed her eyes briefly, not to pray but to steady. Every loss added weight, but weight meant purpose. She opened them again, voice firm. Next room. The hallway looked like a war zone now, walls slick with water, lights dimming to back up power, the faint stench of burned circuitry hanging in the air. As they reached the fourth room, Thompson and Chen trailed behind under guard. The adrenaline had drained out of them, leaving shame in its place. When the door opened, Dakota stopped short. Inside, crates of M4 carbines gleamed under emergency lighting, all with serial numbers she recognized. These were reported destroyed 6 months ago, she said. Training accident. Thompson's voice was small. We were supposed to ship them out tonight. 300 rifles, 20,000 rounds, 6 saws. To who? He hesitated. The cartel's middleman said if we didn't, they'd release the videos. Bradley looked disgusted. You sold your country for blackmail. Thompson didn't respond. Dakota's eyes softened not with forgiveness but with comprehension. Guilt's a prison too, she murmured, but you can still unlock the door. The fourth device was almost lazy compared to the others, a basic timer taped to the underside of a crate. She disarmed it in 30 seconds flat. Then her brow furrowed. This one's different, she said. Different explosive, older timer, different signature. Bradley caught on immediately. Another bomb maker. She nodded slowly. Martinez's cell wasn't alone. Behind them, Martinez spoke, his voice shaking. You think this stops at us. You have no idea how deep it goes. Dakota turned, then enlighten me. He stared at her, something between defiance and despair. You can't stop what you can't see. She stepped closer, water dripping from her sleeves. I see enough. But the truth was she didn't, not yet. Not the names, not the scope, not the full rot that had spread through the chain of command. Yet as she looked around at the rifles meant for the black market, the soldiers who'd traded honor for silence, the metal that had triggered all of it, she realized something else. It wasn't just a mission anymore, it was an inheritance. Foster's last breath hadn't been a death rattle, it had been a command. And Dakota Rivers never disobeyed an order like that. Why did the vault feel like a heartbeat? Dakota stood in the narrow hallway, rainwater dripping from her sleeves, listening to the hum that pulsed from the end of the corridor, steady, mechanical, alive. It wasn't just power lines. It was something hidden, running beneath the floor, buried under layers of secrecy and steel. Behind her, Chief Bradley checked the hallway cameras, voice low but urgent. We're off the grid now. External comms are jammed. Command's trying to override lockdown, but they're getting errors. Someone's feeding the base a looped security feed. Dakota nodded slowly. They knew I was coming. You think this was a setup? She didn't answer. The truth was she didn't know. But the way Martinez kept smirking, even now, handcuffed to a railing, soaked and beaten by consequence, it told her enough. You were always chasing ghosts, Rivers, he said, blood mixing with rain on his face. Foster thought he could save the system. You think you're any different, you'll end up the same. Dakota turned toward him, eyes cold but steady. The difference between him and me. She paused, voice quiet but sharp as the edge of a blade. He died still believing in people like me. Martinez laughed, but it came out hollow. She stepped past him, keying the access panel at the end of the hall. The keypad flickered, access denied. She tried again, using Bradley's override code. Nothing. Then she reached into her pocket. The metal, Foster's metal, was warm against her skin. Chief, she said quietly, cut power to this wing, manually. He frowned. You'll trip the containment fail-safes. Do it. He hesitated, then slammed the emergency switch. The lights went black. The hum beneath the floor stopped. The air changed. In that silence, Dakota pressed the metal against the keypad. A soft tone, then green light. The door unsealed with a hiss. revealing a chamber none of them had clearance to know existed. Inside, the walls were lined with weapon racks, but these weren't rifles or explosives. These were sealed cases marked Strategic Intelligence, Eyes Only, crates that didn't exist on any manifest. And on the far wall, lit by a single flickering bulb, hung a corkboard covered in files, photos, coordinates, and handwritten notes. Foster's handwriting. Dakota stepped inside like someone entering a church. Every breath was reverent, heavy, fragile. Pinned to the center was a photo Captain James Foster, smiling awkwardly in his desert fatigues, arm around a younger woman in aviation blues. Her throat tightened. He kept this. Bradley walked up beside her, his tone soft. Looks like he built a case. He built a war, Dakota murmured. He just didn't live long enough to finish it. The board told a story in fragments, shipments rerouted to private contractors, coded invoices signed off by non-existent officers, and one central name circled in red ink, Colonel Samuel Rains. Bradley exhaled. Rains, he's base command. Dakota nodded slowly. Foster's last report mentioned a high-ranking collaborator inside Logistics Command. He never named him until now. She traced the line of string connecting Rains's photo to a map of Mexico's northern border. Pins marked the routes, shipments labeled as expired munitions, vanishing between checkpoints. Martinez started laughing again from the doorway. You think that's proof? You think anyone will believe a soaked sergeant waving conspiracy notes around? Dakota didn't look at him. No, she said, they'll believe his voice. She pulled a small device from the wall, a weathered flash drive, sealed inside a waterproof casing. A label in Foster's writing read, "For her." Her chest ached as she read it. He knew, Bradley said quietly. He always knew. The flash drive clicked into the tablet. A video opened, grainy, handheld. Foster's voice filled the silent room. If you're seeing this, Rivers, it means they found me first. Don't waste time looking for my body. They'll burn the reports, bury the files, blame the dead. But the data's here. Everything ties back to Rains, the contracts, the off-book shipments, the fake casualties. It's all him. You always said soldiers follow orders. I need you to follow this one. Finish what I started. Don't let my name end with a lie. Dakota's jaw clenched. She looked away from the screen, blinking hard. The room stayed silent, except for the faint hum of backup power returning to life. Rivers, Bradley said quietly, we have to get this to command. Evidence like this could blow the whole thing open. Command is the problem, she whispered. Rains is command. If we send it up the chain, it dies before sunrise. So what's the plan? She looked at the tablet again. The metal, the board, the ghosts. The plan, she said softly, is to survive long enough to make the truth impossible to bury. The alarm outside shifted tone, deep, resonant, mechanical. Bradley checked the feed. New alert, vault breach detection. Someone's trying to override the lockdown from the control room. Martinez grinned. That'll be Rains, he's coming for you himself. Dakota holstered her sidearm, face unreadable. Then let's greet him properly. Bradley blinked. You plan on fighting command? No, she said, eyes steady. I plan on showing him what loyalty looks like when it bleeds. They sealed the vault behind them, locking Foster's evidence inside a portable drive. Dakota tucked the metal into her vest, just above her heart. Every step back toward the armory felt heavier. The water had begun to pool, reflecting the strobe lights like 1,000 small mirrors. Every reflection showed a different version of her, the soldier, the spy, the survivor. As they reached the junction, the radio crackled. A new voice clipped, calm, commanding. This is Colonel Rains. All units, lockdown override in progress. Any personnel found with Sergeant Rivers are to be detained immediately. She is under active investigation for espionage and terrorism. Bradley swore under his breath. He's flipping it on you. Expected. Rains continued. You are not soldiers anymore. You are accomplices. Stand down and you will be protected. Resist and you will be fired upon. Dakota met Bradley's eyes. You believe him. He gave a bitter smile. I stopped believing in speeches a long time ago. She nodded. Good, then we keep moving. They pushed forward through the maintenance wing, lights flickering, the echo of boots behind them growing louder. Rains' security team. Elite, fast, disciplined. For a moment, Dakota slowed her pace. She touched the wall, the cold concrete slick with rain, and remembered the first time Foster had brought her into a fight like this. You don't win wars with bullets, he'd said. You win them with truth, but truth's the one weapon nobody wants to fire. Her hand fell away. She whispered almost to herself, then fire it we will. The corridor opened into the control center, a room filled with monitors and consoles, all displaying the same error: lockdown override failure. Rodriguez was there, crouched behind a terminal, her hands trembling but still working the keys. I rerouted the security feeds, she said breathlessly. They think we're in the motor pool. Dakota knelt beside her. Good work. Elena looked up, eyes wide. They said we'd be killed. The colonel's men, they're authorized to shoot to kill. Dakota's voice softened. Then stay behind me. The door behind them burst open. 3 soldiers in tactical gear stormed in, rifles raised. The lead man's voice was sharp. Hands up. Bradley fired first, one clean shot into the floor panel beside them. Sparks exploded upward, forcing them back. Smoke filled the doorway. Dakota pulled Rodriguez to cover. They're not aiming to arrest, she said quietly. Then what? A bullet ripped through the console above their heads. Silence witnesses, Dakota finished. They moved fast, smoke, motion, instinct. Bradley returned fire in controlled bursts, driving the attackers back into the hallway. Rodriguez clutched the tablet to her chest. The files copied, all of it. Then we run, Dakota said. They bolted through the auxiliary exit, a narrow service tunnel lined with exposed wires and dripping condensation. The emergency lights cast long shadows. Halfway through, Bradley slowed. They'll corner us in 10 minutes. Unless we drop the lockdown, they'll just burn us out. Dakota stopped, leaning against the wall, breath ragged but eyes clear. We drop it, she said, but we broadcast the data through the emergency network at the same time. The system backs up every code black alert to Central Command plus 3 external archives. If we sync it, they'll get the truth before Rains can suppress it. She nodded. Bradley hesitated. That'll expose you too. Your undercover ops, Foster's files, everything. Dakota's answer was quiet. Then maybe they'll finally see what we gave up to keep them safe. For a second, the only sound was water dripping from the ceiling. Then Bradley exhaled. All right, Sergeant, let's go make history. They reached the far end of the tunnel. A sealed bulkhead marked command access only. Rodriguez stared at it. We don't have clearance. Dakota smiled faintly. We have Foster's medal. She pressed it to the scanner. Green light. The bulkhead unsealed. The door slid open into a room bathed in cold blue light. Servers, blinking indicators, the beating digital heart of the entire base. Bradley muttered, You really think he meant for you to find this? Dakota stepped forward. He didn't trust anyone else to finish the story. And then, as the door closed behind them and the hum of the servers filled the air, she felt it, not fear, not even adrenaline, something else. A quiet certainty. The kind you only feel when the ghosts stop whispering, and you realize you've become one of them. How do you face the man who killed your mentor, when he still wears your nation's flag? The air in the command data vault was cold enough to sting. The hum of the servers was steady, like a heartbeat buried in steel. Blue light from the racks shimmered across Dakota's soaked uniform, turning every drop of water into tiny shards of ice. She stood in front of the terminal, Foster's flash drive plugged in. The upload timer on the screen blinked 18%, then 19%. Data was moving, slow and relentless, like truth clawing its way out of a grave. Behind her, Bradley guarded the door with his rifle. Rodriguez knelt by the secondary console, routing uplinks through every emergency frequency she could hijack. The girl's hands shook, but her eyes were alive, scared, yes, but burning with purpose. Dakota's gaze stayed fixed on the upload bar. Every second mattered. Every percent was one more nail in the coffin of the men who thought they were untouchable. The door behind them hissed. A mechanical lock released. Bradley swung his rifle toward it. Movement. Then the voice came, calm, steady, too measured to belong to anyone afraid. At ease, Chief. You'll only embarrass yourself. Colonel Samuel Raines stepped through the fog of condensation like a man entering his own kingdom. He wasn't armored. Didn't need to be. His uniform was spotless, his silver oak leaves gleaming under the cold light. He looked around the vault, the servers, the flashing alarms, the drenched floor, then smiled faintly. You've made quite a mess, Sergeant Rivers. Dakota didn't move, sir. Her tone was flat, neither respect nor rebellion, just recognition. Raines took a few unhurried steps forward. His boots made no sound on the graded floor. Captain Foster always spoke highly of you, said you were the kind of soldier this generation needed, disciplined, unshakable, incorruptible. He paused. I told him that kind of idealism gets people killed. Dakota turned slowly, meeting his eyes. You were the one who sent him to Mexico City, the one who cut his comms. You made sure his report never reached oversight. He smiled faintly. He was a liability, a good man, yes, but naive. He didn't understand what it takes to keep this machine running. The machine. Her voice barely rose above a whisper, but every word carried weight. You mean the black market weapons, the off-book shipments, the dead civilians in Sonora. That machine. Raines clasped his hands behind his back. You think war ends when the shooting stops. Someone has to keep the balance. The world runs on power, Rivers, not purity. Bradley's rifle never wavered. Sounds like treason wrapped in poetry. Raines turned his head slightly, studying him. And yet, you followed her down here without knowing half of what she's done. Dakota's jaw tightened. Don't. Oh, he deserves to know, Raines said softly. Your friend here, she wasn't just investigating us. She was part of an off-the-books task force that made its own rules. Foster wasn't the first they used, or the last. Do you know how many missions ended with necessary casualties in her record? Bradley glanced at her, but she didn't flinch. I've read your file, Raines continued. Fallujah, Kunduz, Kandahar, you followed orders until you didn't. Until you decided your morals were worth more than the system you swore to serve. Dakota looked up at him. Her voice was steady, quiet, lethal. You're right about one thing, Colonel. I did stop following orders. The day they stopped meaning something. Raines took another step closer, now only a few feet away. You think you can expose me. You think one medal, one file, one trembling private behind a keyboard can bring down an institution built on secrets. He gestured at the servers. Pull that trigger, Sergeant, and the system will erase you faster than it erases guilt. You'll vanish. The truth will vanish. And I'll still be here, shaking hands with senators while your name turns into a cautionary tale. Dakota turned back toward the upload screen. 63%. Her voice came slow. You're right again, truth doesn't last forever, but it lasts long enough. He took another step. You won't make it out of this base. She met his gaze again, no fear this time, just something colder. I don't have to. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was alive, pulsing with tension, like the air before a lightning strike. Bradley moved a step closer. Colonel, drop it. Walk away while you still can. Rains laughed once quietly. You think I'm unarmed? He lifted his wrist. The small silver watch glinted, then clicked. Every server light turned red. The hum deepened into a low mechanical growl. Rodriguez shouted, "He's triggering a data purge." Dakota spun to the console. The upload bar flickered, 68%, 71%, 65%. Data streams collapsing and rebuilding. Rain spoke softly. "You can't win by playing on my field." "Then I'll change the field." She yanked the metal from her vest, slamming it onto the main access pad. Sparks leapt across the screen. Code poured down like rain. Bradley stared. "What the hell did you just do?" "Foster's failsafe," she said through gritted teeth. "He embedded a virus in the metal's biometric chip. If the system detects a data purge, it forces a mirror upload to external archives." Rains lunged forward too late. The terminal screamed with alerts. "External transmission engaged. Multiple uplinks detected." Rodriguez gasped. "It's sending everything, the files, the manifests, the recordings, to every connected command node." Rains's composure cracked. "You don't know what you've done, Rivers." "Oh, I do," she said. "You called it a machine. I just jammed the gears." He drew his sidearm smooth, practiced. Bradley raised his rifle. "Don't." 2 weapons, 2 soldiers, 1 breath. For a heartbeat, it felt like the whole world held still. Then Rains spoke, low and bitter. "You really think Foster died for justice? He died because he believed in you, because he couldn't see what you are, a weapon pointed in every direction, even at yourself." Dakota's voice dropped to a whisper. "You're wrong." "Am I?" She took a slow step forward, eyes locked on him. "He didn't believe in me. He believed in the part of the system that still feels shame, the part you tried to erase." Rains's finger twitched on the trigger. Then the base lights flickered, once, twice. A deep mechanical rumble echoed through the structure. Rodriguez shouted, "External powers cutting out." The upload hit 92%. Dakota's eyes darted to the screen. "We just need a few more seconds." Rains fired. The shot cracked through the vault, deafening, echoing final. Bradley stumbled back, hit in the shoulder. He dropped to a knee, teeth gritted in pain. Dakota dove for cover, the bullet ricocheting off a steel rack. She slid behind a console, heart pounding. The tablet clattered beside her, screen cracked but still alive. Rains advanced, voice echoing through the chamber. "You should have stayed a soldier, Rivers. You were good at taking orders." "Maybe," she said softly, "but I was better at surviving them." She popped out from cover, fired once. The round struck Rains's sidearm, knocking it from his hand. It skittered across the floor into the shadows. He didn't retreat. He just straightened, eyes wild now. "You think you won. You just made yourself an enemy of the entire apparatus that built you. Then I'll build something better." 93%, 94%. Rains lunged for the console, slamming his palm against the emergency cutoff. Sparks exploded. Smoke filled the room. Dakota shouted, "Rodriguez, backup line now." The young private crawled across the floor, blood on her cheek, fingers flying across the secondary console. "Rerouting to emergency broadcast." Rains turned toward her, fury breaking through the calm. "You don't even know what you're fighting for, girl." Elena looked up at him, voice trembling but defiant. "I know what not to be." He raised a hand, but Dakota was already there. She grabbed his wrist, twisted, slammed him into the server rack. The impact rattled the room. His breath left in a grunt. She pressed him there, inches from her face, eyes burning. "For every soldier you used," she hissed. "For every lie you buried, for Foster." He smiled through blood. He was just one name. She shoved harder. "So am I." 95%, 96%. He tried to reach the watch again. She caught it, ripped it off his wrist, and hurled it against the wall. It shattered. 97%. Rains's voice was a whisper now. You'll die here, Rivers. Her answer came quiet, almost gentle. Maybe, but I'll die clean. 98%. Bradley, pale, clutching his bleeding shoulder, staggered up, rifle raised again. End of the line, Colonel. Rains laughed, a hollow sound. You'll never stop it. Cut one head, two grow back. Then we'll keep cutting, Bradley said. 99%. Dakota looked at the screen. Time seemed to slow. She whispered, barely audible, for you, Captain. 100%. The upload complete tone was soft, almost peaceful. Transmission verified. External redundancy confirmed. The lights flickered, then steadied. Rains went still. What did you send? Everything, she said. Every deal, every false report, every dead name you thought no one would remember. He stared at her, breathing ragged. You think truth wins wars? No, Dakota said quietly, but it ends them. He lunged again, pure desperation. Bradley fired once. Rains hit the floor. The echo stretched long until it faded into the hum of the servers. Silence. Dakota stood there, staring at him for a long time. Then she holstered her weapon, reached down and closed his eyes. Command may erase his name, she murmured, but the dead remember who made them. Rodriguez sat back against the wall, trembling. It's over. Dakota shook her head slowly. Not yet. Now comes the cleanup, the denial, the headlines. Bradley groaned, clutching his arm. You think any of that matters now? She looked at him, eyes steady, voice calm. It always matters. Outside, the alarms began to fade. The red lights dimmed to white. For the first time all night, the base was quiet. But peace never came easy, not for soldiers who'd seen what truth cost. Dakota looked at Foster's medal, still warm in her palm. You said one person can't fix the system, she whispered. Maybe you were right. Maybe one can only light the fuse. She slipped it back into her pocket and turned toward the corridor. And tonight, the whole world's about to see the fire. What happens when the truth finally escapes the cage you built for it? Hours passed, or maybe it was only minutes. In places like this, time doesn't move. It hangs heavy and thick, waiting for permission to continue. The Blacksite Armory lay in ruin. Smoke curled from broken vents, water pooled under flickering lights, and the faint smell of thermite still lingered like a ghost. Dakota Rivers sat on the concrete, back against a cold wall, blood drying at her temple. Her uniform was torn, streaked with ash and truth. In the distance, sirens wailed, not alarms this time, but ambulances, the kind that show up too late to save anyone who mattered. Bradley sat nearby, shoulder wrapped in gauze, his rifle discarded beside him. Rodriguez crouched over the cracked tablet, her fingers trembling as she scrolled through the screen. It's everywhere, the young private whispered. They can't stop it. News channels, encrypted boards, even the defense net mirrors, it's all out there. Bradley exhaled slowly. Then the world finally gets to see what we've been protecting. Dakota didn't respond. Her gaze was fixed on the open door ahead, the one that led outside into daylight she wasn't ready to face. The sky beyond was gray, painted with smoke and mourning. Rodriguez's voice cracked. They're already calling you a traitor, ma'am. The base comms, they're saying you infiltrated, sabotaged, staged the whole thing. Dakota smiled faintly, but there was no joy in it. That's what they do. Truth always sounds like treason to liars. Bradley grunted in agreement. Still, they'll send teams, damage control, maybe worse. I know. She pulled the silver star from her pocket, wiping soot from its surface. The engraving was nearly worn away now, Foster's initials still barely visible. You ever wonder, she said softly, why soldiers keep fighting wars that aren't theirs? Why we salute people who lie to our faces? Bradley looked at her. Because we remember what happens when we don't. Dakota turned the medal over in her hands. Foster used to say the hardest thing in war isn't killing, it's knowing when you've finally done enough. She looked up at the shattered monitors around them. I'm not sure I've done enough yet. Rodriguez knelt closer, eyes wide, pleading. Ma'am, you've done more than anyone. You stopped them. You showed the world. Dakota's voice was quiet, heavy. No, I just ripped the curtain. Someone else still has to step through. A low rumble echoed outside. Not an explosion this time, but the distant whir of helicopters. Bradley's head tilted. Command's here. Dakota didn't flinch. They'll want a body count and a scapegoat. Guess I'm both. He pushed himself up with a groan, hand on his shoulder. You think I'm letting them take you? She met his eyes. You've done enough, Chief. You're injured. They'll need your statement. Someone has to tell them what really happened. And you? She smiled faintly. I was never really here, remember? Before he could answer, she rose, slow, deliberate. Her boots left wet prints across the floor, heading toward the sunlight cutting through the open doorway. Rodriguez reached for her. Dakota. Stay with him, she said gently. You've got more courage than half this base combined. Don't lose it. The girl swallowed hard, tears mixing with grime. What'll happen to you? Dakota looked out toward the landing field, distant figures moving, soldiers forming perimeter lines. The sound of rotor blades grew louder. She adjusted the strap on her shoulder, Foster's rucksack, patched and burned but still holding. Doesn't matter, she said softly. It's already in motion. Then she stepped into the light. The world outside the armory was chaos wrapped in discipline. Medics rushed between vehicles, fire crews doused smoking wrecks, and armed MPs shouted orders that nobody really heard. As Dakota walked through the wreckage, soldiers turned, some in shock, some in recognition, some in quiet hatred. She kept walking. A lieutenant stepped into her path, weapon raised. Sergeant Rivers, you're under arrest by order of. She raised a hand. Save your breath, Lieutenant. You're about 12 hours too late. The man hesitated, then lowered his weapon. There was something in her eyes that made obedience seem childish. She walked past him without another word. At the far end of the tarmac, a convoy of black SUVs rolled in, unmarked, sleek, dangerous. The kind of vehicles that don't come with names, just authority. The door of the lead vehicle opened. Colonel Raines's aide, Major Claire Monroe, stepped out, flanked by two men in tactical gear. Her uniform was immaculate, her expression unreadable. Sergeant Rivers, she said, voice even. By direct order of the acting command authority, you are to surrender yourself for debrief and detainment. Dakota stopped a few meters away. Acting command authority, that was fast. Monroe didn't blink. The colonel's death has raised concerns about internal infiltration. They believe you may have been compromised. Dakota laughed softly. You mean inconvenient? The major's expression didn't change. You understand this isn't personal. There's procedure to follow. I used to believe in procedure, Dakota said. Then I saw what it was protecting. She looked past Monroe at the armed men forming a perimeter. You can't bury this. It's already out there. Monroe's tone softened slightly. Maybe, but you and I both know stories can be rewritten, contexts adjusted, records classified. Dakota studied her for a long moment, the faint tremor in Monroe's hand, the careful words. She saw something familiar, fear wrapped in professionalism. You were one of his, Dakota said quietly. Raines groomed you, same as he tried with Foster. You think loyalty means silence. Monroe's jaw tightened. I think loyalty means survival. And what does dignity mean? The question hung between them, sharp, heavy, unanswerable. Finally, Monroe nodded toward the SUVs. Please, Sergeant, don't make this harder. Dakota stepped closer. You ever wonder what Foster's last words were? Monroe hesitated. No. You should, Dakota whispered. He died thinking someone like you would make it right. Monroe blinked. Something cracked behind her eyes, just a flash of doubt, but it was enough. Dakota turned away, heading toward the eastern perimeter where smoke met dawn. "Stop her," one of the soldiers shouted. But Monroe raised a hand. "Stand down." They hesitated. Orders and conscience don't mix easily. Dakota didn't look back. Her silhouette vanished into the mist, swallowed by the slow crawl of sunrise. By the time the official report reached Washington, the story had already fractured into 3 versions. Version 1, the official one, labeled her a rogue agent, a disgraced investigator who'd compromised national security during an internal audit gone wrong. Version 2, the whisper version, called her a hero, the kind of soldier who traded her life to expose rot that would have festered forever. And version 3, the one Foster would have believed, simply called her necessary. Because sometimes, the system needs someone who's willing to bleed for its conscience. 2 days later, Chief Warrant Officer Tom Bradley sat in a hospital bed, shoulder in a sling, staring at a muted television. The news anchor's voice was soft, sanitized. Continuing coverage of the Fort Garrison incident, where multiple explosions and a data breach have led to a full internal investigation. Preliminary reports suggest significant lapses in command oversight. He turned off the screen. Rodriguez stood in the doorway, her uniform pressed, eyes hollow. "They're questioning everyone, trying to figure out what to do with us." Bradley sighed. "They'll do what they always do, pretend to fix it until the headlines fade." She nodded slowly, "And her?" He didn't answer. Instead, he opened the drawer beside his bed and pulled out something wrapped in a cloth. He unfolded it carefully, Foster's silver star. Rodriguez's eyes widened. "How?" "She left it in my pocket before she disappeared," he said quietly. "Didn't even notice until they dragged me out." The metal caught the light, just a faint gleam, like memory refusing to die. "She's gone?" the private asked. Bradley stared at the metal for a long time. "You don't really go after something like that. You just fade into legend." He smiled faintly. "And legends are the only things they can't classify." Somewhere beyond the city limits, a gray truck rolled down a dirt road, unmarked, unremarkable. Behind the wheel, a woman with a scar along her temple watched the horizon through dark glasses. The radio crackled with fragments of news, her name, her crime, her myth. She turned it off. The road ahead stretched endless, quiet, empty. Dakota Rivers adjusted the mirror. The silver star hung from it by a worn string, swinging gently with each bump in the road. She whispered more to herself than anyone, "For you, Captain." Then she pressed the accelerator and drove toward whatever came next. The narrator's voice softened as the frame faded to quiet. "Sometimes the war doesn't end when the guns go silent. Sometimes it ends when one soldier decides to stop obeying lies. The truth isn't clean, it doesn't salute, it doesn't wait for orders, but it remembers. And sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts." How do you disappear when the whole world already knows your name? Dakota Rivers drove until the sun broke over the desert, a slow red burn on the horizon, slicing through the clouds like a wound that refused to heal. The highway was empty, the kind that only ghosts and fugitives used. Her truck rattled over the cracked asphalt, a map folded on the passenger seat, coffee cold in a tin cup beside it. 3 days since the Blacksite Armory. 3 days since truth hit the networks like a detonation. 3 days since her name went from soldier to suspect. The government had called it an internal breach event. The media called it a domestic act of whistle-blown treason. But the people, the ones who'd lost brothers, fathers, daughters to false orders, they called it something else, justice with a price tag. She'd heard the chatter in the gas stations and diners she passed through. Her name whispered in the same breath as Foster's, half curse, half prayer. At a truck stop outside Albuquerque, she'd seen a wall-mounted TV replaying the leaked footage. Her, in the vault, slamming Foster's metal into the terminal, the upload bars glowing red in emergency light. The anchor had said, "The unidentified female operative believed to be Sergeant Dakota Rivers has not been located. Officials warn she may be armed and dangerous." Armed and dangerous. She almost laughed at that. Danger wasn't about weapons, it was about what you knew. And she knew too much to ever be free again. The safe house sat half buried in the desert, an old Air Force listening post that hadn't heard a whisper since the Cold War. The walls still hummed with static when she flipped the generators on. Inside, she set her rucksack down, washed her hands, and finally looked at herself in the cracked mirror above the sink. The woman staring back didn't look like a soldier anymore. Her hair was shorter now, cut with a knife in the side mirror of a truck. Her uniform had been traded for worn jeans and a plain gray jacket. The lines around her eyes were deeper, the light behind them dimmer but sharper. She touched the scar on her temple, the one from Raines's bullet that had grazed her. It had healed, but the ache stayed. She wasn't running from justice. She was running from the version of justice that kills to protect itself. For 2 days she listened, scanning military bands, encrypted chatter, civilian broadcasts. Command had spun the story fast. Colonel Raines was now a victim of an internal extremist infiltration. Martinez and his men were listed as rogue elements under foreign influence. The Blacksite Armory was under renovation for security compliance. Every word was a burial. Every headline, another shovelful of dirt over truth. But somewhere beneath it all, a different current flowed. Online forums flooded with copies of the files she'd released, photos, documents, transcripts. Anonymous analysts picked through them like archaeologists uncovering the bones of an empire. And across the country, quiet resignations began to appear in classified news feeds. Commanders stepping down, procurement officers reassigned, contracts suddenly under review. Foster's name appeared again, officially restored to service honor. She read that line twice, then closed the laptop and stared out at the desert until her vision blurred. At night she dreamed of him. The old Humvee on that dark road, the smell of iron and dust, his hand gripping hers as he bled out. "Don't let them turn honor into a slogan," he'd whispered. "Make it mean something again." And she'd promised, not because she believed she could, but because it was the only thing she had left to believe in. By the 5th day, someone found her. It started with the faint hum of a drone, low, steady, like a mosquito that refused to leave your ear. She stepped outside, just enough to see it glinting in the dawn light, too small to shoot, too precise to mistake. They'd found her signal, maybe from the generator, maybe from a careless ping on the laptop. Didn't matter how, they always find you. She didn't panic. Panic gets you killed faster than bullets. Inside, she grabbed the essentials, rucksack, sidearm, Foster's medal, and slipped out through the drainage tunnel that led into the desert. She didn't look back. Hours later, miles away, she reached the edge of an abandoned freight yard. The rusted skeletons of trains sat silent under the blazing sun. It smelled of oil and regret. She climbed into the shadow of an old car, unrolled her jacket, and checked the small radio she'd built from scavenged parts. Static, then a voice. "To all stations, confirmation pending. Repeat, confirmation pending, she's alive." Another voice, younger, nervous. "You sure?" Command said. "Command says a lot of things, but I saw the transmission. She sent it herself, the metal girl, Rivers." The nickname made her close her eyes. The metal girl. She hadn't asked for that. Foster had once told her medals weren't rewards, they were reminders of the people who didn't come home. Now his was the only thing that still tied her to the uniform she used to love. Night fell fast. The desert cooled, stars sharp and endless above. She built a small fire, ate from a tin of cold rations, and sat alone with her thoughts. Her voice low, almost prayerful. They'll twist your words, Captain. They'll call you a ghost story. But I'll keep the truth breathing, even if I have to drag it through hell. She looked up, the stars reflected in her eyes like old coordinates. They think I'm running, she whispered. I'm not. I'm just reloading. By the seventh day, she found a signal that wasn't military. A civilian band, encrypted but familiar. She adjusted the dial. A series of clicks, then a coded pattern, Foster's old cipher. Her heart kicked. No, it can't be. She decoded the signal line by line. It formed a short message. Foster protocol active. Safe node, 9th meridian. Her pulse quickened. The Foster protocol was a contingency, one she'd helped him design before his death. If any operation went black, the system would trigger hidden caches of evidence, buried deep in the global comms network, accessible only to verified agents. Which meant someone else had activated it. Someone alive. The 9th Meridian was a relay station in Nevada, long abandoned, stripped of satellites, forgotten. She knew what it meant. Foster wasn't the only one gathering proof. He'd had help, and whoever that was, they just called her home. She packed up, doused the fire, and headed north under the stars. The road back to Nevada was long and silent. No radio, no music, just her thoughts and the low hum of tires on dirt. She thought about Rodriguez, the courage in that young voice. About Bradley, wounded, loyal, too stubborn to quit. They would survive, maybe even rebuild. But her, she was something else now. Not soldier, not whistleblower, not even fugitive. Something quieter, harder, necessary. At dawn, she reached the relay station. It stood against the desert horizon like a monument. No one wanted any more. Broken antennas jutting from the sand, wind whistling through shattered glass. Inside, dust coated everything. The walls still carried faded symbols, U.S. Signal Intelligence Command. She powered up the old generator, and for a moment the base came alive, a skeleton breathing again. On one of the cracked monitors, a symbol appeared. The Foster insignia, 2 intersecting lines, 1 broken. Then a voice, mechanical, distant but hers. Welcome back, Sergeant Rivers. Authentication confirmed. Her throat tightened. You left me something, didn't you? The screen flickered. Lines of code rolled like rain. Then a single file name appeared, Project Daedalus. She frowned. That wasn't in your reports, Captain. The system beeped. Access granted. She opened it. And what she saw made her chest go cold. Blueprint contracts, logistics. Weapons distribution routes extending far beyond U.S. borders. Funding lines tied to private corporations, political donors, even humanitarian fronts. This wasn't about one corrupt base. It was an architecture of corruption. Foster hadn't just found rot in the walls. He found the blueprint of the entire house. She leaned against the console, eyes burning. You knew, didn't you? She whispered to the empty room. You knew they'd kill you before you could show this. Her reflection stared back from the dark screen, tired, furious, unbroken. This isn't over, she said. The wind outside howled through the broken antennas, carrying her words into the emptiness. She reached into her pocket, pulled out the silver star, and placed it on the console. For a long moment, she just looked at it, that tiny piece of metal that had outlived its owners, its wars, its lies. Then she whispered, You started this, Captain. I'll finish it. The screen flickered once more, lines of code rewriting themselves into a new directive. Rivers, Protocol Daedalus initiated. Somewhere in the distance, unseen satellites stirred from dormancy. And for the first time since the Armory, Dakota Rivers felt something she hadn't dared to feel, not peace, not pride. Purpose. The truth doesn't vanish when you bury it. Her voice would echo over the narration. It grows roots, it learns your name, and someday when you least expect it, it knocks. How do you fight an enemy that doesn't exist on paper? The files from Project Daedalus burned across Dakota Rivers. Laptop screen like revelations too dangerous to name. Blueprints, funding routes, dozens of front companies registered to hollow addresses. Weapons and ammunition rerouted through humanitarian convoys. And at the center of it all, a logo she recognized. Meridian Logistics, the same corporation that had donated supplies to Fort Garrison for years. The same one that funded veteran programs and built monuments in small towns. Patriotism carved from corruption. She leaned back in the rusted chair, the desert wind whispering through cracked windows. "You bastards built a business out of war," she muttered, and Foster found the receipt. The laptop beeped a warning, connection unstable. She closed the file immediately. Too much time online was dangerous now. They'd be tracing any signal. She stood and paced the room. The silence of the relay station felt heavy, like it was listening. Foster's voice echoed in her memory. "They'll call it national security, but it's just greed wearing a flag." She looked at the silver star lying on the table. "You were right again, Captain." That night she left the station. The sky was black velvet, stars sharp enough to cut through. She walked to the old truck and loaded her gear, water, weapons, drives, maps. Before she started the engine, she glanced at the metal again, hanging from the mirror by its frayed string. "You're my compass now," she said softly. Then she drove north. By dawn, she reached the outskirts of Reno, the kind of city that hides its sins behind neon and noise. Her contact there wasn't military, not anymore. Jalen Knox, former Intel analyst, dishonorably discharged for leaking false drone reports. He'd been living off the grid for a decade, paranoid but alive. She found him in a shuttered auto shop, his beard gray, his eyes glassy from too many nights without sleep. "Dakota Rivers," he said, half impressed, half terrified. "The ghost of Fort Garrison." "You're not hard to find if someone wants to," she replied. He smirked. "Lucky me then, coffee." She shook her head. "Information." His amusement faded. "Always business." She dropped a flash drive on the table. "Project Daedalus." He stared at it like it was radioactive. "Where did you get that?" "Foster's Protocol." He swore softly. "You don't know what that name means anymore. Daedalus isn't just a project. It's a network. Contractors, politicians, foreign investors, everyone with blood on their balance sheet." "I want names," Dakota said. "You don't want these names," he replied quietly. "They're people who can erase countries, not just soldiers." She met his gaze, steady and cold. "Then I'll start with one country, mine." Knox sighed and plugged in the drive. Data cascaded down his screen, maps, transfers, encryption keys. He whistled low. Foster was sitting on a bomb. This could bring down half the Defense Council. "That's the idea." He looked at her, really looked. "You don't plan to survive this, do you?" Dakota didn't answer. Her silence was enough. Knox leaned back, lighting a cigarette with shaking hands. "You know, people like us, we used to believe in systems. Believed if we just told the truth, someone would care. Then we learned truth doesn't pay taxes." She looked out the window, where the early sun cut through broken glass. "Truth doesn't need to pay. It just needs to live long enough to be found." He exhaled smoke through a smile that wasn't joy. "You sound just like him." "Foster." "Yeah, he said something similar the night before they killed him." Dakota turned sharply. "You spoke to him?" Knox nodded slowly. "He came to me for encryption help, said he was building a dead man's trigger. I told him not to trust anyone above a lieutenant, Guess I was right. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Did he mention who else was helping him? Knox hesitated. Yeah, one name, someone inside Logistics Command, female, used to feed him intel. Her pulse quickened. Who? He looked at her carefully. You sure you want that answer? Say it. He exhaled, slow and deliberate. Claire Monroe. The name hit like a physical blow. Colonel Raines's aide, the woman who had let her walk away. Dakota's throat tightened. No, she was his handler, his. Knox shook his head. She was working both sides, feeding Foster data, feeding Raines disinformation, probably tried to keep balance until it fell apart. Dakota closed her eyes, the memory of Monroe's face burning behind them, calm, precise, unreadable. She whispered, she's still inside. Knox nodded, and she's cleaning house. I've seen command chatter, they're spinning Daedalus into a foreign interference op, blamming enemy cyber infiltration. They'll use that to lock down every piece of evidence you ever touched. Dakota looked at the flash drive. Unless I pull her out first. He frowned. You're not serious, she'll have you shot on sight. She had her chance, Dakota said quietly. Now she gets her choice. She left that night. Knox offered her his pistol, his satellite phone, and a warning. Truth doesn't win, Rivers. It just burns slower than lies. She nodded once, then I'll keep the fire alive. The road to D.C. stretched like a scar across the continent. She drove without rest, stopping only for gas and to patch the wound on her shoulder that still ached in cold air. Every rest stop mirror showed a different face, older, harder, more hollow. She wasn't afraid of dying anymore. She was afraid of being forgotten. By the third night, the sky over Kansas turned purple before dawn. She parked by an abandoned motel and slept for 2 hours, her pistol within reach. Dreams came again. Foster's voice. The metal clinking on concrete. The alarm screaming. And Monroe's eyes, watching her leave that morning not with pity but with calculation. She woke with her heart hammering, whispering into the darkness. You didn't let me go out of mercy. You let me go because I'm still useful. By the time she reached Virginia, the news had already shifted tone. Headlines. Defense corruption probe underway, whistleblower still at large. Colonel Raines, successor, promises reform and stability. Fugitive sergeant linked to data leak. New evidence points to foreign funding. Foreign funding. They were building her into an enemy of the state. Piece by piece, word by word. She found Monroe 2 nights later. Langley, a private terminal at the back of a decommissioned airfield. Guards on rotation, lights dim, the smell of jet fuel thick in the air. Dakota moved like she used to, shadows within shadows. She found Monroe alone in the control room, staring at a screen full of redacted files. For a moment, Dakota almost hesitated. She remembered Monroe's calm voice at Fort Garrison, her restraint, her almost human eyes. Then she stepped out of the dark. You always did like working in low light. Monroe didn't flinch. I was wondering when you'd show up. Dakota lowered her hood. You're cleaning up Daedalus. Monroe sighed softly, trying to keep it from becoming a war. You mean a scandal? Monroe turned. Do you have any idea what would happen if the world saw the full scope of that program? Governments would collapse, alliances would crumble, we'd lose control. Maybe control is the problem, Dakota said. You sound just like him. Foster believed in the truth. Monroe's gaze softened for half a second. So did I once. Dakota took a step closer. You let me walk away that day. Why? Monroe looked at her, and this time there was no mask, just exhaustion. Because I needed you alive. You were the only one who could still make them listen. You had the credibility Foster lost, the emotion people believe, the soldier's heart. You used me. I protected you, Monroe corrected. You think you survived that lockdown by luck. I made the call that kept the extraction team off your trail. You're only here because I wanted you to be." Dakota's voice trembled, anger, disbelief, pain, all tangled. "Then you finish what he started. You have access. You can expose it all." Monroe shook her head. "There's no system left to expose it to. Every oversight body is compromised. Every channel's filtered. The only thing we can do now is contain the damage." "Contain the damage," Dakota echoed, bitter. "That's what they said when Foster died." Silence. Then Monroe whispered, "He loved you, you know." Dakota froze. "What?" Monroe's voice was soft, broken at the edges. "He told me once, said you reminded him why soldiers still mattered. Not the medals, not the flags. The ones who still believed something pure was possible." Dakota's eyes burned. "Then why didn't you save him?" Monroe swallowed hard. "Because I still believed the system could." The room went still. Two women standing in the wreckage of what faith used to mean. Dakota's voice broke. "You were his handler. You were supposed to protect him." "I did," Monroe said quietly, "from worse things than death." For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Dakota said, almost to herself, "You're going to bury Daedalus." Monroe didn't deny it. "I'm going to make sure no one uses it again." "And me?" Monroe met her eyes. "You disappear, stay dead. That's the only way the truth survives." Dakota stared at her, the fatigue, the sorrow, the compromise etched into every word. "You ever wonder," she said softly, "how history decides who the villain is?" Monroe's answer came like a confession. "It's always written by whoever's still breathing." Dakota nodded slowly. "Then breathe while you can." She turned and walked away. Monroe didn't follow. Outside, the night was cold and quiet. Dakota walked across the empty tarmac, wind cutting through her jacket. The metal hung heavy against her chest. She whispered, "You were right, Captain. The war never ends. It just changes uniforms." The sound of distant thunder rolled across the sky. Or maybe it was just another engine starting somewhere she'd never belong again. She climbed into her truck, started the engine, and drove into the darkness. Her voice, soft, raw, unbroken, carried over the final frame of that night. "You can't kill truth. You can only delay the moment it remembers your name." What happens when the war you fought finally forgets your name? The night after Langley, Dakota Rivers didn't sleep. She drove until the roads vanished into dust and the map turned blank. Desert again, her oldest hiding place. The sky above her stretched black and wide, stars burning like old memories refusing to fade. The truck stopped beside a crumbling overpass. The engine ticked, cooling in the cold air. She stepped out, boots crunching gravel, wind biting her skin. Somewhere behind her, the world was already rewriting her story. Government feeds, talk shows, journalists spinning her into every shape they needed, traitor, savior, ghost. She was all of them, and none of them. In the quiet, she pulled the silver star from her pocket and turned it over in her palm. The metal was cold now, the engraving almost gone, worn smooth by time and blood. Foster's name had once been sharp on it. Now it was just a scar, the memory of a name, not the name itself. She built a fire under the bridge, small, controlled, the kind of flame that doesn't spread but never dies. It hissed softly, eating through bits of paper, a discharge form, a rank patch, a photograph of her unit. She watched them curl, blacken, and disappear. There's a moment in every soldier's life when the uniform stops being armor and starts being a cage. She'd reached hers long ago, she'd just been too loyal to notice. Her voice, soft, trembling, carried through the crackle of the fire. "You were right, Captain. The system doesn't change. It just sheds its skin and calls it progress." She smiled faintly. "But maybe that's why people like us exist. To remind them that scars don't fade, no matter how many medals they polish." She looked at the medal one last time. I carried you long enough." Then she placed it gently into the fire. The flames licked the edges, turning silver to red, metal to memory. It glowed bright, then dimmed. The sound it made wasn't loud, but it filled the silence like an oath being kept. At dawn, she started walking. No destination, no mission, just movement, the kind that keeps ghosts at bay. The sun rose behind her, throwing her shadow long across the sand. Her voice over the image would be calm now, reflective. "They'll tell stories about what happened, about the Armory, about Foster, about me. They'll pick a version that fits the world they need to believe in. That's fine. The truth doesn't need witnesses, it just needs time." By the second day, she reached a small town nameless on the map, too quiet to matter. She bought gas with cash, bread with silence. Nobody recognized her. At the edge of town, she passed a church with its doors open. An old veteran sat on the steps, medals pinned to his coat. His hands shook as he saluted every car that went by, though few saluted back. Dakota stopped. For a moment she saw Foster in that man's face, the same tired pride, the same unshakable dignity. She walked over, placed something in his hand. A single bullet, unfired. He looked up confused. "What's this for?" She smiled faintly. "For the one you didn't have to shoot." Then she kept walking. She found refuge in the mountains, a cabin that once belonged to a ranger who died years ago. The walls were cracked, the air thin, the silence perfect. There she began to write. Not reports, not confessions, letters. One to Bradley. One to Rodriguez. One addressed simply, to whoever still believes. The paper carried her words like they were fragile, like they could break if she pressed too hard. "Don't make me a hero," she wrote. "Heroes die for symbols, I died for people. There's a difference. Don't make Foster a martyr. He didn't want followers, he wanted witnesses. And don't let them tell you we failed. We didn't. We just reminded the machine that it still bleeds." She folded the letters, sealed them in an envelope, and placed them in a tin box under the floorboards. Then she sat by the window, watching snow drift over the peaks. For the first time in years, her hands didn't shake. Weeks passed, the world moved on. New headlines, new wars, new names to replace the old ones. But every now and then the truth resurfaced, small, persistent. A leaked memo, a resignation, a whisper of Daedalus in defense, hearings no one televised. And always, at the bottom of those stories, an anonymous tag appeared in the data logs. User ID, R1V3R5. The ghost still watching. One night, as wind screamed outside the cabin, she dreamed again. Foster sat across from her at the fire, uniform clean, eyes calm. He said nothing, just smiled that tired, quiet smile. She asked, "Did we win?" He shook his head. "We remembered." When she woke, the fire had gone out. She didn't relight it. The next morning, she walked into the snow. The path behind her was faint, half buried already. She carried only what she needed: a small pack, a compass, a photograph of Foster, and nothing else. As she climbed higher, her breath turned to mist. The air thinned, but her heart felt lighter. The voiceover in the final scene would come low, soft, the sound of resolve rather than pain. "They'll say I ran. Maybe I did, but running isn't the same as hiding. Sometimes it's just choosing your battlefield. Foster once told me every truth demands a sacrifice. I used to think he meant blood. Now I know he meant anonymity." She reached the ridge, the sun breaking through cloud, gold spilling across white snow. She stopped and looked back. The valley below stretched endless, a world both worth saving and unworthy of it. She whispered, "We gave them the map. What they do with it isn't ours to decide." A pause. Then softer, "Goodbye, Captain." The wind carried her voice away. Months later, in a federal archive somewhere under D.C., An analyst opened a file that wasn't supposed to exist. It contained the missing portion of Project Daedalus, annotated in handwriting, neat and deliberate. At the bottom of the final page was a note. For the record, honor still exists. It just stopped asking for permission. Dr. And somewhere in the mountains, under a sky that didn't care about politics or headlines, a campfire burned in silence, steady, small, unending. No uniforms. No medals. Just a reminder that truth, once spoken, doesn't need an audience. The narration, closing over fading music, would speak softly, the final moral echo of the story. They stripped her backpack, they burned her record, they buried her name. But they forgot one thing: you can't silence someone who never needed to speak. Because sometimes dignity doesn't argue. It doesn't demand. It doesn't even stay to be thanked. Sometimes dignity just walks away. And the world never feels the same again.